What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Shake Chatterjee, and here we are with another episode of Life is Blurry. Today, we have a very special guest, none other than Dr. Diane Strachowski, a licensed psychologist for over 20 years, born and raised in Chicago, go Bears, and an avid reality TV enthusiast. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing from Dr. Diane, who specializes in relationships, finding relationships, maintaining relationships, building relationships, and someone who loves reality TV and then is also working in relationships. I'm sure she's going to have some very interesting insight on the function or dysfunction of relationships that we see on TV. So, Dr. Diane, I know one of the primary things you reach for when talking to couples, talking to singles, is attachment styles. Would you mind just running through some common attachment styles just to get us started?
Thank you so much, Shake, and thank you for having me. I do want to say that I'm a psychologist, but I'm not your psychologist. So I let everybody know that right when we get started, because I couldn't be on a show if I was your therapist, actually, because of confidentiality. But
that's fair.
I love to tell people about attachment theory because honestly, I'm super passionate about it myself. And it's the only theory that you will actually need to understand relationships. So attachment theory has been around since the 1950s. We break it down into 4 different types of attachment styles. And you have to just know who you are and who your partner is to figure out if it's going to work. But 75% of the population is insecure. Okay, this is why dating is so hard. This is why relationships are so hard, because we naturally come into relationships with a lot of our insecurities. We throw that word around a lot. But the 4 types are secure, securely attached, and this is what happens in your primary relationship with your parents. The first 2 years of life are critical. Okay, if you're secure functioning, that means your parents were highly attuned to you. You felt unconditionally loved. So you're relaxed in your relationships. You don't get like too amped up or too hyped up by too many things. 2, you can have an anxious attachment style. I call that nervous, like nervous Nora, nervous Nick. I have characters. Then 3rd, you can have a more avoidance style. Avoidant is more like you seek to be independent. I would call you independent Ian or Isabel. And 4th is you have more fearful avoidant. It's a combination. I call you more confused because relationships can confuse you. Confused Connie or Connie.
So quick question. Is it possible to go from a nervous Nick to a secure Shake?
Yes, absolutely. And this is what I teach people how to do. Because John Bowlby, the founder of attachment theory, said it's from cradle to grave, which sounds daunting, right? It's like, oh my God, I'm never going to change. But that's not true at all. We want you to be a secure Shake. And then it's just a matter of figuring out how to better manage your nervous system, how to manage your thoughts, how to manage your behavior. And so I help people online in courses and in couples, and how you really want to be is in your relationship, you want to be secure together. So it doesn't matter where you start. It only matters where you end in a good relationship that allows you both to feel security.
Love that. Okay, well, that's good. I think that's going to give a lot of people hope, because I can't imagine it's fun to be anxious or fearful when it comes to relationships. So that's great. What attachment style are you, Dr. Diane?
I raise my hand immediately and I say I'm the anxious type myself. Now, having said that, I've been happily married for 12 years. And so I would call myself a secure Sophia now. But I tell you why I have this platform, Shake, is because I went to 7 different therapists when I was single and I got married later in life. Not a single therapist ever said to me, Diane, I think you have an anxious attachment style. And if I had known that and had a label for it, we call it name it to tame it, then I would understand, this is why I get attached so quickly. This is why I wear my heart on my sleeve. This is why I'm so disappointed in people. And we look at even like what we call anxious, kind of angry, why people get hyped up. And if you understand that and you figure out how to manage your anxiety, then you really know how to improve your relationships. So I'm the first to say
that makes
that
sense. So,
I was anxious and now I'm more secure.
oh, well, congratulations. That's fantastic. It sounds like knowing what type you are is like the first critical step into making any kind of progress. Is there an easy way to find out what you are? Is there like a BuzzFeed quiz I could take?
Well, I
I mean,
have a quiz.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. I figured you would have something like
I
that. You're a
do,
smart,
and
smart woman. Okay.
I've had like 66,000 people take my quiz. It's on my website,
Wow.
backtolove.com. And then another book I highly recommend is called Attached, which helps people figure out their attachment style. And there are a lot of other online quizzes. But really, the only way to get to know somebody is actually talk with them and understand their background and their history, because we can confuse even like avoidant with anxious. And underneath both of those insecure types, there is anxiety. But the fear manifests itself slightly differently. And so you really have to, it's hard to capture it in a quiz. You really have to get to know somebody.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. So I can find out what pizza topping I am,
Yes.
but probably not my attachment style by taking a simple quiz. It takes a little bit more than that.
It takes a little.
That makes sense. People are more complex than pizza, as it
That's
turns
right,
out.
because life is blurry. Mm-hmm.
Life is blurry. Thank you. Thank you for referencing that. Well, I'm just curious, based on what you saw on the show, what would you classify me as?
So, Shake, I will tell you, I was a little bit confused by you. I saw a lot of intensity from you.
I hear that all the time. You're confused by me. You're not alone.
I was straggling between anxious attachment style because I saw some behaviors from you, like turning towards other people, wanting to have conversations, wanting to explore things. And I saw some hurts in you when things didn't go well, like you care very much. And you yourself said, I went on the show to find love. And just interesting point, in my quiz, 46% of women have the anxious attachment style. 39% of men. It is the most common type. And in fact, those are the people who go on reality shows because they want.
I was going to ask. Yeah. There's a certain type of people that find themselves in this situation.
Absolutely.
And then, you know what? The people making the shows, they're salivating, right? Because this is the type of people they want.
It makes for good TV. It really does. I follow The Bachelor, and then there's just the context that makes people more anxious too. So that's why it's hard to pick out what is your trait versus sort of what is the context, right? So having said that, if I wanted to figure out whether you were anxious or ambivalent, really my question to you, Shake, is when you're stressed, okay, when you're under stress, do you need time with others? Do you seek validation, or do you need time alone to process?
It's a combination. That's a tough question to answer. I mean, there's a lot of things that I do like to turn to others, not for validation, but for perspective, because I understand that, you know, I'm a speck in this universe, and what I think isn't necessarily what everyone else thinks. So I do like to get other people's opinion on things to make an informed decision, not necessarily to validate. I'll tell you this, I don't need anybody else's approval than my own, but I like to think I'm you know, humble and smart enough to seek out the knowledge of others. I know I don't know everything.
Well, and that's the reason why you even asked for a therapist to come on the podcast. So I really appreciate that. Well, let me go back to family for a minute. In your family, though, was there a lot of warmth and connection and processing emotions? Or was it more on the cool side and kind of distant and like, I'll handle it on my own?
Well, you know, it was a bit of both. So I'm an only child. But growing up, my parents we all moved here from India, you know, when I was 3, and coming here with really nothing and trying to build a foundation. My parents started a business. And so when I was growing up, they were thoroughly immersed in running, operating, growing this business. And as an only child, I didn't really have anybody a lot of times, to interact with. And I kind of always wanted that, and it's not as though like my parents are amazing. I love them. They love me. We have a great relationship. And it's a relationship that's gotten better over time. But during those years when I kind of wanted or needed someone, I didn't always feel like someone was there. And it's something I would never, ever blame them for. Right. I mean, coming to this country, I mean, you have to, claim your stake. You have to build something. You have to, I mean, they did it for me. Right. Like for their kids and then for my kids. So I understand that mindset, but at the same time, it's a luxury.
Thank you for sharing that, because there is oftentimes only children feel that desire. I get it though. My parents are Polish immigrants. My father was a plumber. I get that. And we had 5 kids. So we just had more, there was more energy, but that could account for you feeling that you really want a relationship, but you just didn't have that to sort of talk in because your parents were so busy. And that might mean a little bit more of that loner type of, perhaps some avoidant tendencies.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I mean, I'm all ears here. If you think so, that at least that part fits. I think you alluded to this, but I will agree with you that I don't know that if I fit neatly into any one category, but this is always the case for every personality test or aptitude test or anything. So sorry for being a, extra difficult case for you here.
But here's the thing too, Shake, it actually, as I said, it doesn't matter where you start, only where you end. And the tools to learn for becoming secure are actually very similar. But for you, if that is the case, if there's some avoidant tendencies and you like to kind of go in your silo and process alone, I would really encourage you something to work on or to look about is how to be vulnerable and how to open up, because people will want more from you. And we all say we want emotional intimacy, but sometimes if we don't know what it is, we don't know truly what being vulnerable looks like.
Okay. That's fair. And it's interesting because I'm actually at this point in my life more open to sharing my vulnerable side than I've ever been before. And, going on this show has definitely pushed me to become that way, but also reading books by Brene Brown and just doing a lot of work on myself, it has allowed me to open up, but I don't particularly like opening up to everybody, I feel like that's to some extent something that almost has to be kind of earned in, like as far as trust wise.
Absolutely. And I think you have to know your boundaries, and certainly sharing it with people and then having empathy and being open to the process. And it's got to be a give and take, right? But more important than anything, you have to create security in your partner. And so it's not just knowing your own attachment style, it's knowing your partner's attachment style to understand what do they need. Because what is inherently different is in the 2 different main insecurity types, anxious or avoidant. The anxious person is going to need validation, reassurance. They're going to need to know, usually their love language is verbal. I need to get positivity from you. Versus an avoidant person needs space or distance and can feel crowded easily. So it's just a difference of needs, and it's understanding that need. And back to like your parents, it's no one's fault. No one's pointing fingers at anyone. It's just really understanding the context. And it's called epigenetics, meaning my parents give me what they had. So like in my anxious family, my mother is quite anxious. Thank goodness she doesn't listen to podcasts. And her mother was anxious, and their whole family tends to be in that sense, versus the more isolated avoidant type. That's kind of a family dynamic too. So we learn these things through observation, through mirror neurons. It's the same thing in animals, that's how they learn, through mimicking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a good point about the animals. Well, we were talking earlier about the types of people that find themselves on reality shows. And as it turns out, it's usually anxious people, right? Can you talk a little bit more about that and how that affects their behavior and just their overall experience on these shows?
Well, it's the same people who get hurt easily on dating apps too. Why they would even go on the show, because they're tired of not being special, right? I'm on a dating app, and you even mentioned the paradox of choice. That's what I
Mhm.
teach people about. Like when we have so many options, none of them look good. And then there's this idea like there's a bigger, better deal out there, right? And so
Yeah.
people get frustrated with online dating, and they might say, hey, listen, if I can go from zero to a husband in 30 days and 90 days, 90-day fiance, well, maybe that's better than swiping endlessly. So I can see the desire that people would have. But oftentimes I think the repercussions are they don't realize that you open yourself up to a lot of commentary.
Yeah, you really, really do. And it's nothing you can prepare for,
Sure.
Watching reality TV, it's very easy to say, you dummy. Why would you say that? You knew it was going to be seen by millions, but it just doesn't work that way in real life. As much as somebody tells you that's how it is, until you find yourself in that situation where you're kind of mic'd up constantly and you kind of let your guard down sometimes, or sometimes, it's drawn out of you quite purposefully to say something, or behave a certain way. And then those certain characteristics are taken out of context, highlighted, boosted, and then you find yourself kind of
Oh,
helpless.
Jake, I'm sure, and we talk about this on The Bachelor too, the creative editing and then what they show or what they don't show. But what I love about attachment theory too is I say that we're all like tea. You don't know who someone is until you put them in hot water. And then you
Ooh.
see their flavor, then you see their essence. And because reality TV also has this pressure to get together so quickly and make fast decisions, that's why it makes for good TV. And I follow it really with the lessons that we can learn, like do this, don't do this. This person's handling this well. This other person seems like they're in their nervous system. They're kind of aroused. It's not a judgment. It's more like just what can we learn about this? And then how can we learn how to calm down, how to relax, how to handle things, and how to partner better.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It really is the perfect recipe, honestly. But thank you for saying that. And especially for some of the people that aren't so familiar, um, they sometimes wanna believe that is completely true and real what they see. But it's nice to have an expert like yourself who's familiar with not just my show but other shows, and it is a pretty common formula.
It's called parasocial, meaning that people then look at a character, the same thing they do with soap opera fans, right? Like they literally think that that's who you are. They forget that you're like
Yeah,
acting in some ways, right? So they
right.
project a lot of what they think is right or wrong. And because of social media, I can hide behind my phone, then people just think that they can freely kind of comment on it, right? Not appreciating what a pressure cooker you're in, what hot water you're in. And there's just so much going on. Plus, you're isolated, et cetera, that it's really hard to kind of keep your footing.
Totally. How do you how would you explain this phenomenon where people project their own insecurities onto the people on the screen? That's something I've kind of noticed. It's like someone hurt you, and I remind you of that person. So now I'm receiving, like I'm the target of that anger or hatred, even though what I did isn't really the same as what happened to you.
Well, and again, it happens on other reality dating shows. And what happens is, let's say I have a toxic ex who's yelled at me or who judged me negatively. I watch this on TV and I go, oh my God. And so I get triggered, right? Because now I feel like this is happening to me. And so, because maybe I don't have contact with my ex, I have contact with this show, then I'm going to have all
Mhm.
of these feelings, right? So
Mhm.
it's that I've gotten triggered watching that. And that's why we throw around terms like narcissism and gaslighting. And I try to peel that back and say we have to be careful about the use of those terms too, because we do want to build hope, right? We talked about you want to build hope. And if you believe that all relationships are toxic, then that's not going to be very hopeful.
Right. Totally. And I also see people, it's won't even be necessarily me that's triggering them. It's also they're relating so much to, we'll say the female character that they, it kind of becomes more about them and how they're viewing things and how they put themselves in their shoes, and they take it almost personally. Whatever happens to them, they take personally to themselves.
And Jake, I think just to be frank too, my dissertation and my expertise is also on body image. And so whenever we talk about body image and we talk about body dissatisfaction and cultural norms, women are so embedded of this in the culture about what is beauty, and there's so much sensitivity to that topic that I think in particular that can be incredibly charged for people.
Absolutely. Well, on that subject, do you think it's okay to have sexual preferences based around physical attributes?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we all have a type, right? And I think it's only a matter of importance. So I think for you on the show, it was clear that you had a preference and you had a type, and you said it, right? And other people may not be as forthcoming about that. But I actually did some research on this to see if there's any statistics on it. And there is a study, interesting enough, that looked at people at speed dating versus people in long-term relationships. And the difference was gender. So men and women both going into speed dating say that like a body type or having attraction is super important. But for men in particular in long-term relationships, it is a factor of marital satisfaction more for men than women. Okay.
Yeah. So we both care,
Yes.
but the men. So, okay. That's kind of what I was trying to say, on the final episode, I was trying to say, I want this relationship to work. And I know if I set myself up for failure, with a certain body type, that's just not going to happen. And I was hoping I would be, at least somewhat, if not appreciated, at least recognized for having that self-awareness where I know it's going to be difficult. That should be proof that I'm that willing to try this out, but it kind of got spun the opposite direction.
And let's stick to gender for a minute, Shay, because I think what's really important is that men are kind of a little bit more black or white on this, okay? A man is either attracted or he isn't, but women, their attraction can grow, okay? So a woman will oftentimes meet a guy and she'll be like, I don't know. But wow, he's so nice. He's so kind. He listens to me. He's so great. He makes me laugh. And now her attraction builds. So what might be super important for you may not be as important for someone else. Or again, a woman's marital satisfaction doesn't have that much to do with her partner's attractiveness because there's so much else there. So I think it's fair that you said it was important for you, but for some people, they may decide it's not as important or they can build the attraction.
Okay. Yeah. And it's great to know that there's a huge gender difference there. I think, for certain reality shows, maybe that needs to be taken into account because it's not apples to apples.
Right.
It's not, what men use, the parameters men use to decide whether someone is marriage material is not the same as what women use. So by removing one of those factors entirely, it highly favors one side more than the other. Would you agree?
Yeah. And here's the other thing too. There are many things about the show that I do think work. And I think why people want to go on some reality dating shows is because they do feel like, we need more diversity. We need to see more different kinds of relationships. But I think at the end of the day, you have to peel it back and just say what works for you. And I do think that reality dating shows help. And it sounds like you've gotten more clarity, Shake, on what is important for you. And otherwise, a lot of people just go into dating kind of unconsciously. They don't really think about like who, what, where, why, what's going to work for me. And so I get people to really be more intentional about their dating, about who or what. But I think the problem that people had was not sort of what was said, but kind of how was said, right? Because in communication, 7% of what we say is the actual words. The 93% is the nonverbal. It's the tone. It's how we say it. And I think when I said that I thought that you might have an anxious style, it's that you seemed pretty amped up about that.
Yeah. In any particular moment?
Well, in the reunion in particular, I think it felt like, wow, he's really doubling down on this. And I felt like I'd wondered if somehow you hadn't felt understood. And so you seemed to me that you got more aroused. And I just mean that from a nervous system, from what we call polyvagal system, which you probably know with animals, right? When animals get anxious, right? The vagus nerve that runs from your brain to your gut gets aroused, and it's hard to calm down.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the den of wolves, honestly. That's what it felt like. And I don't know if it was really like apparent to everybody else, but that was a hostile environment for me. I mean, here I am, kind of the failure of the show. And why am I a failure? Because I recognize that physical attraction, visual attraction is very important to me.
To you. Yeah.
I thought it was an experiment. I thought I was allowed to say that, but it wasn't taken favorably. And in the environment I was in, it was like a fight or flight situation, you know, and I didn't have the option to flight. So I had to fight.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. It wasn't pretty, but I stand by what I said.
You know, and here's the thing, Shake. It's just, again, something to learn. And myself being a nervous person, you know, I find that like meditation and breathing and exercise and all those things can help me kind of down regulate and be able to kind of monitor that. But I absolutely saw that happening in you. And I felt for you because it's hard, right? And everything is so magnified. And then the work comes later in the processing and then getting into a next relationship, which sometimes actually we find on reality shows that it's the relationship after the TV show, because now you have clarity that really kind of sticks because it may not be that one. I mean, the paradox of choice, who's to say that 1 out of 15 is going to be your person?
Oh, it's statistically like ridiculous that's the case. And it's funny that you say the relationship after, because I have found myself in just a wonderful relationship. And yeah, she just so happens to be blonde, you know. I got an immense amount of clarity, you know, despite how things kind of played out. It was a incredibly beneficial experience for me because even though it was upsetting to others, I figured out exactly what it is I want. And the people hating on me actually empowered me. The more people that wanted to talk smack about me being the way I am, it just made me stronger. It just made me double down, like you said, triple down even. Say, hey, this is me. And why should I be embarrassed for liking what I like? And it kind of gave me the power to go after that without any hesitation.
And then the truth is, I also say to couples, though, you know, get help, get maybe a couples counselor, because it is hard post show. I don't think the therapist should be on set per se. I do think after, just kind of accommodating back into life and then talking about what a healthy relationship is. But if you find that person, and I know you're dating Emily, and if that works and you fit with her attachment style, all you really have to know is her, right? And that's what's really most important, is just kind of leveling that out and figuring out how you're going to manage those stressors together, because we call it managing thirds. In a couple, it's like you are the king and queen. You're managing everybody else outside. In-laws.
Oh, totally.
The public, this parasocial kind of arrangement where people think that. And you've got to just stay quiet. I mean, I'd even encourage you to like turn all that off. Right? And just focus on each other, because you got to establish your foundation.
You're totally right. You nailed it right on the head. I'm very interested in you meeting her. Well, if you're open to it, I'd love to do a part two, because now that we've kind of said our piece and I got to say my piece and you got to explain some very insightful things, it'd be really cool for you to meet Emily and give us your interpretation of her attachment style. I have a pretty good idea of what it is based on what you said and based on how we interact and based on what I know about her, but it's not my place to say that stuff. I'll let her, come forward with that on her own with whatever she's comfortable with. But I think that would be fantastic.
That's really respectful too. And that's great, because I have to be careful, right? I am a psychologist, and based upon little information. And that's why I really appreciate trying to get to know someone, because what we see on TV is different than who the person really is, again, given how stressful the environment actually is. But knowing, you've moved on in your relationship, knowing that you're starting fresh, and then it's just a matter of taking that information and really applying those things that you've learned to yourself. And I did hear you. I might say I saw you on a live with Emily. That was on Saturday, I think. And you did say that you suffered from depression and anxiety. And I didn't know if that's really how you feel, because that's when I thought, is that an attachment component, or if that's really true? And I wanted to check in with you and see how you're doing.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. I wouldn't say it's an attachment component at all. I'd say it's quite independent. However, getting treatment for that has been incredibly helpful for every aspect of my life. I've kind of spoken on this before. Going so long without being diagnosed, I developed all these coping mechanisms to kind of get myself by. I mean, I thought it was normal to just not get out of bed for like a week,
Wow.
and just feel like under a dark cloud. I thought, oh, everybody feels that. And obviously, going through veterinary school,
Mhm.
working as a veterinarian, managing a social life, everything else, I still managed to do that with these mechanisms that I had just to kind of prop myself up, even if it's like, all right, this will get you through this day.
Mhm.
So once I got the treatment I needed, and now that my serotonin's at a normal level, life just feels easy, because I already have all these mechanisms from when things were so bad, and now I'm like at a normal baseline. So my highs are like super high now, and my lows don't fall down to where they used to be. So obviously, as it pertains to relationships, I'm so much more comfortable being open, being vulnerable, showing love, receiving love. Whereas before, it was a lot more lashing out that was happening, because I wasn't feeling good.
And Shake, thank you for sharing that, because of course I work with serious depression too. And absolutely. And when we're not feeling good about ourselves, we're likely to be agitated a lot. People don't even realize that's a symptom of depression, right? But you just have a shorter wick, and we can get very
Totally.
frustrated. And then, it's depression either causes the isolation, or because we're isolated. And with COVID too, we've seen a lot of increase in depression and anxiety because people just didn't have the social interaction. But we see a
Totally.
lot of high functioning people, and it's a chemical imbalance. And people need to realize that treatment involves talk therapy, but also medication to level you out. And so the majority of my clients do both talk therapy and medication treatment to help them just feel like they're functioning at a more normal level.
Well, that's great. And I have this platform now, and I guess people kind of know me for saying crazy stuff and, just being out there, but I want to use it for something that is important to me. And that's making sure people feel comfortable getting the sort of help they
Mhm.
need, because it's just made such a tremendous difference in my life. Um, I'm not afraid to speak my mind. I think everybody knows that. And I'm unafraid to admit that I'm on medication for my depression. And anybody out there who's on the fence, I would say, don't wait.
Mhm.
It's the best decision I ever made in my life, and everything in my life since has gotten better. So, I hope you I hope you get the help you need.
Shake, and that's so important because we have to destigmatize that. We have to say that, this is a chemical imbalance. You can get help. You can get improvement about that. I also think, right, it's important for diet and exercise and health and sleep and then having the right people to support you, having a fulfilling life, right? Having all these other things. And it sounds like you've managed that, right? You're a DJ, you're a vet, you're trying to be balanced in those ways.
Trying to.
And I think Chicago's a tough place because it can be moody there. I know the weather.
Yeah, about that. There might be some changes coming up for me. I don't want to say too much, but yeah, Chicago's been fun. We're going to have to wrap up here pretty quick, Dr. Diane, but like I said, this has been fantastic. I hope we can do a part 2 to this episode. There is one last thing that I want to bring up with you.
Okay.
And that is the Madonna whore complex. And if I understand correctly, you believe that I suffer from that. Can you just run us through what that is real quick? And
remember, I just presupposed that, but let me say a little bit more. Yeah. So the Madonna whore complex was a Freudian thing that Freud came out and said men tend to idealize women in one of two camps. The Madonna is like the virginal woman who's pure versus the whore, who is more of a sexual person. And some men could get caught in that, where like I idealize my wife, but now when I have sex with her, then somehow I flip. And so I didn't know the intricacies of your relationship, but sometimes it's really just about seeing it in two different ways. And we really have to move beyond that to see women as sexual beings, because sometimes women do, I mentioned in body image, we can become objectified, but sometimes women get a lot of mixed messages about sexuality, like don't have sex on the first date, when men don't have those same standards. So it's important that we see women as complex, we see them as sexual beings, and we're not afraid of their power. So I didn't know how you felt in that situation. Again, this was me throwing out the topic and wondering if that applied or not.
I can totally understand the, theory behind it. That wasn't the case with me on the show, and it's definitely not something I'm dealing with now. Okay. Things are cooking. So glad we got to clear that up.
Hey, I throw things out. I think they're concepts for learning, but we do have to just be really, the whole point is in therapy is really just holding space for alternative perspectives, for body image, for sexuality, because women, we need to empower women to find their own voice. And we don't want to give a negative message about that. So I really am empowering sort of women to be open about their sexuality too. But as we talked about earlier, attraction is really at the source of that, it sounded like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Diane, again, it's been fantastic. Is there anything you'd like to leave our audience with as far as reaching you, finding you, following you, hiring you?
Thank you so much. So if people want to take my love style quiz, you text the word love to 33777 and you will have immediate access to my quiz. Everything's on my website, Back to Love Doc, because I want to help people get back to love. And my Instagram is Back to Love Doc. And I do videos on relationships and dating. And I have these online courses, but I can only meet with people in California because that's where my license is. So I treat couples and individuals in California, and then otherwise online courses.
Love it. Well, again, thank you so much, Dr. Diane. This has been a fantastic episode of Life is Blurry. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.